Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got an update from a pollster that has not been very kind to Donald Trump, at least not until recently. You can see this is a pretty crazy trend. Over the past 3 weeks, Trump now leading by a little over a point. I'm not a big fan of this pollster, ActiVote US, but it is interesting to see Harris go from plus 5.5. This is just general popular vote to 2.8 to 1.4. And now Trump is up in terms of the popular vote by 1.2. Now, I do think Trump can win the popular vote. Obviously, he doesn't need to. If he loses it by a point, he's still, I would say, basically a lock to win the general unless something crazy happens in terms of the Electoral College, I mean. But this is still pretty funny to see the shift from not even a month ago. I mean, 5 points in favor of Harris. That's around a 7-8 point shift overall going from Harris to Trump. And the polls kind of right now are all over the place. I don't really think much is shifting, but this is something that has shifted. I think generally at this point, we're going to need more polls to see if we can get an update on certain states like Nevada. I know there was an Arizona poll that had Trump up by about 2 that I recently saw, but we just haven't seen a ton of new polls. There was that New York Times Siena that came out that had Trump up huge in Florida. He was up decently in Texas, but I thought that was kind of interesting to see that. You've got Tim Walz calling to abolish the Electoral College. You know, I was going to do a video dedicated to the Democrats' plan to try and abolish the Electoral College. They can't do it with an amendment. It'll never pass. It needs 3/4 majority. So they're trying to do something where like all these states come together and agree, and it's like this whole big plan. And it's not going to happen, but it is interesting. And Walz is just such a clown. I mean, why would you say this? And of course, Harris, their campaign has to come out and say, that is not reflective of what we want, and they're trying to tone it down. But even Walz saying this close to the election is just so dumb. It's just another thing they have to, explain. And obviously, when it comes to the Electoral College, we should not, like to me, the funniest thing, and nobody makes this point, if you actually want to get rid of the Electoral College, you would have, we know, the biggest populated areas having by far the most power, meaning that New York City and the big cities in California would have all the power, and also Illinois. So you're talking about the 3 states that people are moving away from because of how poorly run they are because of what those citizens voted for, right? Because think about the population losses in Illinois, New York, and California. Those 3 states, those populations having the biggest power to decide the election. I don't think they're very good decision makers. Or if everyone is fleeing those states and they're constantly losing population, I don't think we should trust those states, to have the overwhelming majority in terms of our opinion, because when they say, oh, it's the popular vote, 1 vote equals 1 vote. Well, that's really not true, because people that live similar lifestyles in big cities are going to have so much more power, because there's so much more of them than smaller folks that maybe have more land and control more things. But obviously there's a smaller amount of them in terms of population. So all the dumb idiots in the big cities are going to have all the power. I don't think that's a good idea. And obviously, I mean, California still has a boatload of electoral votes anyways, but this is not something I'm really going to talk about right now. There's really no point. This is really interesting what happened with 60 Minutes, because they really did edit her answer to make her sound, like her original answer to this question was horrible, and they edited it and she kind of sounded okay, but you really shouldn't be allowed to do that. It really should be some type of scandal, because the way they edited that to save Harris with that question, I mean, here, you can just listen to this. I mean, it's really bad.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing.
And you can tell it's edited too. You can totally tell it's edited. I don't know if people are going to pick up on that, though. They're probably not, that because people don't expect things like that to be edited, and you can't do that. I mean, that's just propaganda for their campaign. This was terrible, what happened with Stephen Colbert. So obviously Kamala is doing horrible with men. There's been leaks out of her campaign that they're very worried they're going to lose because of it. And what happens with Stephen Colbert, where he's like, "Oh, like I'm just gonna go ahead and play this and show because it's just so staged and so pathetic." It was a coordinated attempt by the late night show here and Kamala's campaign. What should we do to try and help her? What's the propaganda we need? Well, the demographic you're losing the most is men, so let's try and you're gonna have a beer with Colbert, and it's gonna be so nice. And she like takes this little sip, and it's all pre-planned. It's all so inorganic.
When you first became the nominee and named Tim Walz as your vice president nominee, people were calling it the vibe election. All the vibes were all good. But elections, I think, are won on vibes because one of the old saws is they just want somebody they can have a beer with.
So elections are won on vibes. And that means that it's just someone they can have. See how they're trying to relate this back to actually having a beer? They have to try and tie it back. So it's like, oh, it's because of vibes. You have to have a beer with them because it's just all so ridiculous.
So would you like to have a beer with me so I can tell people what that's like? Okay. Now we asked ahead of time.
And so she has a beer and she barely even drinks it.
Beer was at a...
She barely takes a sip of it. I don't want to get copyright strike from those people. Tim Walz is now claiming Kamala created over 250,000 jobs in Nevada alone, and raised incomes by 10K. I think they just tell him to just say whatever you want. But the jobs are already messed up with the Biden administration and what they claim, because they claim that they created new jobs when in reality they're just the jobs that were added when the pandemic happened. And by the way, the Democrats were the huge proponents of shutting everything down. And now they try and argue that, Trump's economy was terrible. Yeah, you wanted everything shut down. What do you think was going to happen? And Trump left it up for the states. But they wanted a full government shutdown, which Trump only did for a month. They wanted it longer. And then they blame Trump for it. And then they take credit for all these jobs coming back. No, the jobs came back because the country was shut down and so many people had to either remote work or they were out of work. And then they come back after the pandemic's over. During the Biden administration, they take credit for it. So obviously, when it comes to this election, there is a little bit of muddled waters because the Trump economy was so good. But towards the end, obviously, because of the pandemic, it hit, it got really, really bad. And then Biden takes over during it. And then you've got terrible inflation. I'll tell you this, the top 3 issues from what I've seen: inflation, immigration, the economy. That's a death blow to Kamala Harris, an absolute death blow. And it's no wonder that Colbert is talking about vibes. When the top 3 issues all go to the other candidate, you kind of have to talk about vibes. You can't really talk about the actual issues. Well, you can talk about abortion. That's the only one. But even that, you're looking at maybe it being the 4th or 5th most important issue. If that's true, it's going to be very, very bad for Harris for sure. So yesterday I gave my kind of margin in which I think Trump's going to win certain states and Harris. Well, this one, let me react to this and I'll tell you guys what I think. So he's got Arizona going to Trump by 4.5. I think that's a bit much, honestly. I think maybe about 3 points in Arizona. Georgia about 4. I'd probably say about 3. North Carolina 3.5 reduced due to hurricane. I think North Carolina is going to be a bit closer than 3.5. I'd say like 1.5 in North Carolina. Pennsylvania, I could see Trump winning Pennsylvania by 2. I could see Trump winning Michigan by about 1. Michigan's going to be very close. Wisconsin 1.5. That's reasonable. Minnesota, Harris wins it by 2.5. I think Harris probably wins it by 4. New Hampshire, Harris wins it by 3.5. That's understandable. Virginia, Harris wins by 3.5. Yeah. Nevada, Trump wins by 1. Nevada should be very, very close. Maine minus 4.5. Yeah, it's understandable. And New Mexico minus 4, probably minus 5 or minus 6. So yeah, I think these are pretty decent predictions in looking at them. I think he might be a little bit too bullish on Trump in Arizona. I don't know about 4.5. I don't know about 4 in Georgia. I don't know about 3.5 in North Carolina. But you do have to understand, we really haven't seen Trump in a scenario like this where, he's got his approval rating versus Kamala. We didn't see it in 2016. We didn't see it in 2020. Remember, in 2016, Trump was supposed to lose by a lot. In 2020, going into the election, Trump was supposed to lose by a lot, according to all the models. And now it's totally different. Now you've got some like Real Clear Politics thinking that Trump's probably going to win. And you have some models saying that Trump has like a 46% chance. These are the same models that gave Trump like a 10% chance to beat Hillary. So when you factor all of that in, Obviously, it's not an exact science because the models have been wrong before, but it does seem like Trump is performing significantly better to where you could see Trump surprise people and instead of winning Georgia by 1.5 to 2 points, win it by 3.5, 4, maybe 4.5 points. North Carolina, same thing. I don't expect it. I think they're going to be very close, but it is possible. And we know Trump is going to perform better. And the voter registration in every single state, basically every state, is positive in terms of Republicans outnumbering Dems from 2020 to 2024. The growth of Republicans has been very, very impressive in comparison. The country is getting more right wing, and that's why the popular vote is going to be a lot closer. And that's why people are saying that Trump might, in fact, win the popular vote. Either way, it should be very, very close. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.